From Vermont's own WCAX, the Channel 3 News presents the Campaign 2024 debates.
The candidates vying to represent Vermont in the U.S. Senate debate right here, right now on WCAX. Thanks for joining us. I'm Darren Perrin.
And I'm Kat Villianzoni. We are less than 2 weeks away from Election Day, and tonight, incumbent Senator Bernie Sanders faces off against Republican challenger Gerald Malloy.
Incumbent independent Senator Bernie Sanders seeks a fourth six-year term in office. He points to his track record in Congress on health care, housing, and a pro-worker agenda. The 83-year-old says his top priority is making your health care and prescription drugs more affordable.
His challenger, Republican Gerald Malloy, says he wants to push back on policies that Sanders is responsible for. A graduate of West Point, 62-year-old Malloy served for more than 2 decades in the Army. He's a supporter of former President Trump and says he believes the country is headed in the wrong direction. He says he would focus on crime and drugs.
And here are the rules for tonight's debate. For each question, we will let the candidates know how much time they have to answer. There will be opportunities for follow-ups and rebuttals at our discretion.
Each candidate will have 2 opportunities to ask their opponent a question, which should take no more than 30 seconds to ask. And each candidate will deliver a 1-minute closing statement. And we want to start by talking about the state of the nation's political divide as we prepare to elect a new president. Senator Sanders, you're an outspoken critic of former President Donald Trump. How important is this presidential election, and what consequences do you fear if Donald Trump is elected a second time? You have 60 seconds.
Kat, this is the most consequential presidential election in modern history of this country. Donald Trump, sad to say, is a pathological liar. And I think we can't have a president with that type of approach in the White House. Donald Trump, for the first time in the history of the United States of America, attempted to deny a peaceful transfer of power, fomented an insurrection to try to take power when he lost the election. Donald Trump is a man who thinks that climate change is a hoax. Donald Trump is a man who is proud, very proud, to have appointed 3 Supreme Court justices to overturn Roe v. Wade, and Roe v. Wade to take away a woman's constitutional right to control her own body. Is this an important election? You bet it is.
Gerald Malloy, you are a supporter of Donald Trump, and many of your positions fall in line with his. Vermonters have voted overwhelmingly against Mr. Trump twice. Are those voters and Senator Sanders wrong about the former president? You also have 1 minute.
Thank you, Kat. Thank you, Darren. This is, of course, a very important election, and what's happened in the last 4 years is the progressive left has hijacked the Democrat Party and run our country right into the ground. 40-year high inflation, record high gas prices, wide open border. We have a fentanyl crisis here in Vermont that our Congress has done nothing about, including my opponent here. There are 2 wars, 2 new wars because of the failed foreign policy. So this choice is binary. I cannot, like Vice President Mike Pence actually said, I cannot vote for Kamala Harris. This is not, as my opponent has said, this is not a popularity contest. It's about policy. I recognize that President Trump is not popular here in Vermont, but he's going to deliver a better future for America.
May I respond briefly?
Senator Sanders, you can respond to that since you were called out.
Mr. Malloy mentioned Mike Pence. Mike Pence is not supporting Donald Trump. He was his vice president for 4 years, probably knows him better than anybody in the political world. Mitt Romney, 2012 presidential candidate for the Republicans, not supporting Donald Trump. They understand who Trump is.
Do you want to respond to Mr. Malloy, who said that you've done nothing to stop fentanyl coming into the United States?
Yeah, we have done a whole lot. We are trying right now to strengthen the border to make sure that Mexican cartels are not bringing illegal drugs in this country. We're trying in this country to make sure that we have the kind of treatment for people who are addicted to opioids. We're trying to do prevention work here. There's an enormous amount of work that must be done in order to stop the poisoning of our kids.
Gerald Malloy, a rebuttal?
A quick rebuttal, sure. First off, I think it's a disgrace that a United States senator keeps referring to a former president as a pathological liar. That kind of rhetoric led to 2 assassination attempts, so we've got to stop that. It's wrong. Secondly, Mike Pence does not support Kamala Harris for president. That's exactly what he said.
Let's move on. Senator Sanders, age has been a major discussion in U.S. politics. At 81, President Biden bowed out of the presidential race. You're 83. Why run for another 6-year term?
Well,
1 minute.
Darren, that's a great question. And the answer is this country today faces some of the worst and most difficult challenges that it has faced in the modern history of this country. And we're talking about threats to our democratic foundations. We're talking about massive levels of income and wealth inequality and the movement toward an oligarchy where a handful of billionaires have enormous power over economic and political life. We're talking about the possibility, the likelihood, that if we don't get a handle on climate change, the planet that we're going to be leaving to our kids and future generations will be increasingly uninhabitable, unhealthy. We're talking about a moment in American history where women's rights are being challenged, their ability to control their own bodies taken away from them. So the challenges we face are enormous. And I just did not feel, with my seniority, with my experience, that I could walk away from Vermont, representing Vermont, at this difficult moment in American history.
Senator, thank you. Mr. Malloy, you have never served in public office. In 1 minute, what makes you believe you are the best choice, the most qualified to sit in a powerful position in the U.S. Senate?
Well, one of the reasons, Darren, that I'm running for office, I thought Senator Sanders was going to retire. I thought he should have retired. That's because he's been in Congress for 34 years, and he's produced exactly one bill of significance, which he co-sponsored. That was 10 years ago. He's not delivering results. He talks about health care and education and housing, and he's never delivered results on those. All those have skyrocketed. So that's one of the reasons I'm running. I have 40 years of very relative experience, business, government, military, foreign policy. I've actually been served around the world, been part of delivering peace in foreign policy, and I've worked in business. I can grow jobs here in Vermont. None of that's been happening. That's why I'm running.
Okay. May I respond?
Actually, we're going to move on, Senator,
Okay.
but I'm sure you'll be able to include your thoughts in one of these questions.
Okay.
And we do want to talk about the economy because that is one of the major issues for voters. In fact, it ranks as the most important issue for U.S. voters, according to a recent Gallup poll. Mr. Malloy, Vermonters, they're struggling. The cost of groceries continues to rise, as do gas prices and the cost to heat our homes. You say the national debt and overspending are a major contributor to inflation. In 90 seconds, what is your plan to tamp down inflation so Vermonters pay less for the essentials?
So, again, 34 years in Congress, the national debt under his watch has gone from about $3 trillion to $36 trillion. That's 1,100% increase. That is actually threatening our entire economy. We're almost bankrupt. That's part of the inflation problem because the dollar's been devalued so much it actually takes more dollars to buy groceries. It's painful to shop for groceries right now. Energy costs have soared, record high energy prices in 22, 40-year high inflation. That stems from massive overspending. Dumping money into the economy, you're going to get inflation. We got the 40-year high inflation. We're still feeling it now. It starts with fiscal responsibility and a balanced budget, not spending tax.
And Senator Sanders, what legislation have you proposed to cut costs for working families?
Well,
and why might Vermonters not be seeing greater results? You also have the opportunity within this to respond to Mr. Malloy's comments. You have 90 seconds.
I think Mr. Malloy has his sense of civics a little bit wrong here. Mr. Malloy, I personally am not the only person in the United States government. You may or may not know this. There are other 99 senators. There's 435 people now. So you know what? There's a president of the United States. All of them have some responsibility as well. But I am very proud of my record. And when you talk about lowering prices, one of the areas where we've got to do an enormous amount of work is the reality that we are spending twice as much per person on health care as the people of any other nation. Because the function of our healthcare system is not to provide quality care to all, but to make huge profits for the insurance companies and the drug companies. I am very proud, having worked with President Biden. I just did an event with him, as you know, the other day, in lowering the outrageously high cost of prescription drugs in this country, which are far higher than the people in any other country pay. We are making progress. My committee led the effort to lower the cost of insulin. We are working hard and with success in lowering the cost of asthma inhalers. We're working now on weight loss drugs. So cutting the cost of health care is enormously important. Taking on the greed of the insurance companies and the drug companies is enormously important. In terms of the cost of living, housing is a major issue. And clearly, I think Kamala Harris is absolutely right. that one way we deal with the housing crisis and the high cost of housing is start building affordable housing, which is very much in need here in Vermont and throughout this country.
Let's continue on this healthcare discussion for just 1 second, Mr. Malloy. We talked about a single-payer healthcare system here in Vermont. It didn't work. So in 90 seconds, do you believe, let's continue with you though, Senator Sanders, do you believe that it can still work at the national level?
Of course I do. Look, Darren, every other major country on earth has a national health care program which guarantees health care to all people as a human right. In the United States, the reason we don't have that system is not a health care issue. The current health care system is broken. You got 85 million uninsured or underinsured, and we have some 60,000 people a year who die because they can't get to a doctor on time. It is a political issue. It is political corruption in the sense that right now in Washington, D.C., you have the insurance companies and the drug companies pouring huge amounts of money into politicians in campaign contributions. Drug companies alone have 1,800 well-paid lobbyists in Washington, D.C. The American people believe that health care is a right. That's what the polls show. But we have got to bring our people together and force politicians to have the guts to take on the greed of the insurance companies and the drug companies and do what the American people want. Health care as a human right, guaranteed for all people. Every other country can do it. The United States of America can do it.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Malloy, I want to get your take on this as well, because you have said that you don't support government intervention to bring down the cost of health care. What do you say then to Vermonters who can't afford their care, and what do you believe is the solution? 90 seconds.
Sure. Thank you, Darren. So, going back, as you mentioned, Vermont tried universal health care, went way down the road. Democrat Governor Shumlin called it off, said, I'm not putting that extra cost on all Vermonters. Vermont's not ready to assume that responsibility to run health care. Canceled it. So I don't think it is going to work. There's a lot of reasons for that. One of them being we have a $36 trillion debt. My opponent talked about, being proud of his record, health care and education and housing and lowering costs. That's exactly the issue. He has not lowered cost, and he's done a lot of grandstanding, on a committee and berated, big pharma and big health care. But then the important part is the next step. Where is the legislation that'll actually reduce cost to actually create competition? If he's concerned about greed, okay, maybe if there's some monopolistic or collusion activities, legislation to stop that. Legislation to create competition, which we frankly don't have much of here in Vermont. That's why Vermont's healthcare costs is so high. And I would add, what's going on right now, a lot of people don't realize, is they're trying to backdoor in $5 billion to pay healthcare premiums under the Inflation Reduction Act so that voters don't see an increase in their premiums. It's wrong.
Mr. Malloy, thank you. Senator Sanders, let's talk about job growth in Vermont. Mr. Malloy says that our congressional delegation has not brought business and jobs to Vermont. What have you done to help startups in the Green Mountains, and what will you do to bring more businesses to Vermont? 1 minute.
Well, right now, in fact, we have a labor shortage. Our problem is not high unemployment. I have brought in over $2 billion, because I'm a senior member of the Public Works Committee, to help rebuild our crumbling infrastructure. So you go out to the construction folks out there and ask them whether they have enough business. What they will tell you is they don't have enough workers, which raises another issue, and that we need strong apprenticeship programs to help us with to develop the kind of sheet metal workers and carpenters and electricians that we desperately need. So we brought in more money. I brought in more money into the state for infrastructure, repair, and for job creation than any time in the history of this country. There's also going to be an expansion of high-tech programs here in the state of Vermont, which will also create good-paying jobs.
Mr. Malloy, you say that you have 15 years of experience growing businesses and jobs. What is one specific example of a business you helped grow? And if elected, how will you get the votes on a bipartisan bill to support job growth in Vermont? 1 minute.
So I actually have about 16 years in industry, growing jobs and business. I have an MBA. I've actually got a graduate certificate also in data analytics and business intelligence from Georgetown. What my job has been for the last 13 years is called business development. So I engage customers. I find out about their issues and challenges. I lead a team to build a very complicated, maybe 100, 200-page proposal with pricing. I pull all the levers. I compete in a very competitive environment to win new business, primarily to support the DoD and the military. I think that's very relative to being a United States Senator, and I've talked often about what's missing here is Vermont's become unaffordable and unsafe, and people are leaving. In terms of what's missing is industry. I want to make a semiconductor energy tech hub, maybe in Greater Burlington, so young people concerned with the climate can come and develop solutions for future energy that are clean and safe and reliable and affordable.
Can you name a business in Vermont, though, that you helped grow? Business
in Vermont that I've helped grow. Well, I've worked in the defense industry. I was just down at AUSA last week. I met Revision. Gore-Tex has got some Vermont ties. I've actually worked with General Dynamics on different proposals. I've worked with General Electric on different proposals. So I've got a lot of great relationships across industry, and I know I can bring industry here to Vermont. Socialist senator, not happening.
Thank you.
The U.S. budget deficit topped $1.8 trillion, the highest outside of the pandemic. Senator Sanders, what needs to happen to get our debt under control? What gets cut? 90 seconds.
Well, I'll tell you, it won't do what the Republicans want to do. I will not cut Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid, or the needs of working families. But this is what I will do. Kat, we have more income and wealth inequality today than we've ever had in the history of this country. You got 3 people on top who own more wealth than the bottom half of American society. And yet the billionaire class, billionaires pay an effective tax rate lower than truck drivers or nurses. So what we need is a tax system that is fair, that finally says to the billionaire class that they're going to have to start paying their fair share of taxes. Trump and his friends want to give more tax breaks to billionaires, which is one of the reasons that the national debt has risen so high in recent years. The other area that I would take a hard look at is military spending. We're now spending about $1 trillion a year on the military. The Pentagon is the only government agency that has not been able to fulfill an independent audit. I believe in a strong defense, but I don't believe we should allow for massive cost overruns and fraud and waste in the Pentagon. $1 trillion a year, and it has not been scrutinized. I think we could save a lot of money there. And furthermore, I think the federal bureaucracy in all areas needs to be trimmed down. There's a lot of waste in general. Those are some of the areas that I would pursue.
Senator Sanders, thank you. Gerald Malloy, in 90 seconds, where do you think the U.S. is spending too much? And we also will get more specifically to military spending in just a moment.
Sure. You know what? I'm not going to cut Social Security at all. I'm not going to change the age. I'm going to try to fix that broken system that members of Congress, career politicians, have kicked that can down the road for way too long. And older Vermonters ought to be very concerned, because in a few years from now, you're going to get a letter in the mail. Sorry, I know we made a deal with you, and you've been putting money into this for 50 years. Now you're going to get 25% less. That's completely wrong. I'm also not going to cut Medicare and Medicaid. We don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. So it starts with fiscal responsibility and spending. My opponent, Senator Sanders, talks about tax law. That's what Congress does. If there are issues with, create legislation and get it passed to change tax laws. And, a couple of things he never tells you is the top 1% pay 45% of the income tax in this country. And next year, we're going to take in about $4 trillion. We're going to use about $1 trillion, a little over 25%, just to pay the interest on the national debt. So it's a mess. 34 years in Congress.
So where would you cut, though?
Cut. Actually, Department of Defense could use some cutting.
Interesting.
Because I work in the Department of Defense, and I'll tell you, when you go in, I can tell you, when you go into a new contract, the first thing you look to do is do about a 15% cut in the overall price to be competitive.
So let's actually expand on that a little bit. You think the government spends too much money overall. You just said military spending is one area that they might consider cutting. What in military spending do you think could use a hard look?
The Navy. I think the Navy is in not a good shape right now, especially with the situation in Asia. But what I was getting at, I'm talking about services contracts, so the billions of dollars of services contracts to support our entire Department of Defense, and that could use some scrutiny. Like I said, it's pretty much common practice. You look at contracts coming out for rebid or competition, and you might know the previous version. You say, okay, escalation over time, probably the going-in level is at about 15%. We could maybe do that at a large-scale level and save quite a bit of money right off the bat.
Thank you. Senator Sanders, you've been, as we just discussed, critical of military spending. You've also called for the U.S. to halt aid to Israel, citing the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But you support backing Ukraine against Russia. How do you square that? 90 seconds.
Well, they're two entirely different issues. Look, on October 7th, a year ago, Hamas, an awful terrorist organization, launched a horrific attack against Israel, killed 1,200 people, took several hundred hostages. Israel had a right to defend itself, Darren. No question about it. But with Israel under an extreme right-wing government led by Benjamin Netanyahu, with anti-Palestinian racists in his cabinet, what they did is went to war against the entire Palestinian people, not just Hamas, the entire Palestinian people. The result in a group of 2.2 million people, 42,000 dead, 100,000 wounded, 60% of the housing destroyed, the physical infrastructure destroyed, the healthcare system destroyed, and now on top of all of that, because Israel has blocked humanitarian aid, what the international relief organizations are telling us is we're looking at mass malnutrition and starvation of children. When you block humanitarian aid, that's a violation of international law and U.S. law, and that's why I believe that under those conditions, Netanyahu should not get another nickel of U.S. military aid.
Without U.S. aid, though, Senator, and with Israel now getting it from all angles, if you will, Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, are we leaving our ally in the Middle East out to dry?
Well, I think Netanyahu has taken advantage of the United States. We have poured tens and tens of billions of dollars. So obviously I am concerned about Iran. But what Netanyahu's got to do is, if he wants U.S. aid, he's got to listen to what the President of the United States and many of us in Congress want him to do. And that is to not wage an all-out, horrific war against children in Gaza. So it's not a question of our ally. We are putting tens of billions of dollars into them. He's got to listen to what the American people want if he wants that aid.
Donald Trump wants to pull back support for Ukraine, Gerald Malloy. Should the U.S. end or limit its support of Ukraine in the country's fight against Russia? And should aid to Israel be tied to ending the humanitarian crisis with more than 41,000 confirmed dead in Gaza? 60 seconds.
60 seconds. Well, I did want to start off 9/11. I flew out of Logan on United. I was asked to guard the cockpit. I worked at the World Trade Center in the 9/11 response. Terrorism is out there. Our government now has instituted policies or changed policies that are actually supporting Iran, funding Iran, entered back into a nuclear agreement with no teeth. So we're funding Iran that funds Hamas, Hezbollah, and Houthis that conducted that horrific terrorist attack. I support Israel to defend itself and ensure its security. Going back to Ukraine, the debacle, the way we pulled out of Afghanistan, that led directly to Russia attacking Ukraine. I support Ukraine. But what we've got going on here is foreign policy absolute failure. We're that close from World War III in two theaters. And I will say one last thing. There are American hostages being held right now by Hamas. And it was really very disturbing to me to see all three members of Vermont's congressional delegation protest Prime Minister Netanyahu's visit to the United States Congress.
Thank you.
Senator Sanders, do you want to respond to that?
Netanyahu is a right-wing racist extremist who is now developing policies which are causing the starvation of Palestinian children. This is not an American value, and American U.S. aid should not go to support those horrific types of policies. In terms of Ukraine, you have Putin, who, you want to blame Joe Biden for Putin's invasion of Ukraine. Really, you know, Putin is an imperialist. Putin wants to restore the old, you know, Russian Empire, whether it's the Soviet Union or Frederick the Great or wherever it may be. And if you talk to people, leadership in Poland right now, they will say, we are worried that if he wins there in Ukraine, he's going to come after Poland and other Eastern European countries. So I support Ukraine, but that's a very different story than what Netanyahu is doing in Gaza.
Real quick.
Sure, 30 seconds.
Sure. You know, Putin saw an opportunity because he saw weakness. That's why Russia, and I served in the Fulda Gap. I know all about Russia, but that was seeing weakness in the United States. I got to tell you again, the angry rhetoric. Prime Minister Netanyahu is not a right-wing racist extremist.
Thank you. Now each candidate gets to ask another one a question. If you do that, you will have 1 minute to answer that question. Senator Sanders, we're going to start with you. What's your question for Gerald Malloy?
Mr. Malloy, last night you told Vermonters that you supported the Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe v. Wade and deny women in this country the constitutional right to control their own bodies. Why do you think it is okay for the Supreme Court and now state government to tell every woman in this country what she can do with her own body, when, by the way, the state of Vermont, in overwhelming numbers, enshrined abortion rights in our own Constitution? Do you think you're representing Vermont's views when you think it was okay for the Supreme Court to overturn Roe v. Wade?
I'm seeking to be a United States Senator, and what I actually said last night was that I respect women's health care, women's rights, and Vermont laws. And we have a United States Constitution that properly, per the Constitution, seeks to have states and people make decisions, push the decisions to the states and the people. It's exactly what it says in the 10th Amendment. I didn't use the word deny at all. I'm not denying anybody anything. I actually said if something comes up to Congress, pro or con, well, for instance, I'm not going to support a nationwide abortion ban. It's a state issue. You know, you missed the Williston event. I got asked a tough question there by a young lady, which was a fantastic event. You know, there might be 200 million different opinions on this, but per our Constitution, that's the way our Constitution is designed for it to be a state issue.
I heard you say last night, you can correct me if I'm wrong right now. What I heard you say last night is that you supported the Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe v. Wade.
Per the 10th Amendment, I did.
So you believe that the Supreme Court was right in overturning Roe v. Wade?
Per the Constitution, okay. Yes.
Fine. Okay.
And so do most constitutional scholars. We don't need a cookie cutter. Washington doesn't need to be making cookie cutter decisions across the whole country. You know, that's a state issue.
You know, it's a funny thing. When Donald Trump gets up there and he writes these things, he says, everybody believes, Democrats, Republicans, that we should overturn Roe v. Wade. That happens to be a lie. The vast majority of the American people support Roe v. Wade and the right of women to control their own bodies.
You know, there's
one
a lot
more response, and then we are going to move on to your question, Gerald Malloy.
You know, going back last night, I just remember Senator Sanders talking about every scientist in the world, I think he even said, believes we're in an existential climate crisis. That's not true at all, and you know that.
Well, Gerald Malloy, you do have an opportunity to ask Senator Sanders a question
sure.
now. Senator Sanders, you will have 1 minute to respond to his question.
Senator Sanders, I worked with DHS 17 years ago. The border at that time was out of control with drugs and crime. Now it's much worse with fentanyl, crime, and even terrorists pouring across our borders. I've seen it all across Vermont. We have a fentanyl and crime crisis right now. I've seen it myself. And folks ask, you know, why is that? And some, you know, maybe the answer is because progressive left wants voters to come in. Maybe it's even worse than that the progressive left wants to destroy America. You've been a member of Congress for 34 years, and you have failed to secure the safety for the American people. I will. The question is, why would Vermonters believe all of a sudden you now want to secure our borders?
You know, I got to tell you something. Did you just say that I want to destroy America? Was that
your point? Not.
Oh, progressive left wants to, and I'm a leader of the progressive left.
Why are the borders still open?
All right, but you just said something, and I really think, you know, you talk about phraseology, what people, you just basically said the progressive left.
We have a crime crisis and a fentanyl crisis.
Fine, let's talk about the crisis. Do not suggest that I and my friends want to destroy America.
Why is it still open?
All right, but you just said something, all right? In terms of the border, obviously.
Vital.
It goes without, well, actually, the number of illegal people coming in has gone down rather significantly recently. Clearly, we have a serious problem. My father came to this country as an immigrant. I believe in immigration, but it has to be legal immigration. So, number one, we need to strengthen the border. I strongly support, and I've always supported, more manpower on the border to make sure that we cut back on the number of people who come in illegally. We need a lot of technology out there as well. We have that. We're making some progress. We need to do more. We need to have more judges on the border in order to deal with asylum seekers. But we also need, in my view, finally to deal with the issue of comprehensive immigration reform. We have folks in this country who came here as babies. Their parents came here legally. They are now 25 years old. Some of them are teachers. Some of them are in the military. Some of them are working hard. Some of them are entrepreneurs creating jobs. The idea that Donald Trump says, we're going to get rid of all these people, send them back to a country that they don't know, and a language that they don't even know. That's unacceptable. So we need comprehensive immigration reform and a strong border.
Thank you.
Real quick.
We do need to get to the rest of the issues.
Yep, we'll get back to the issues in just a moment. But first, we want to maybe lighten things up a bit with this question for both of you. Who is your biggest role model? Gerald Malloy, we'll start with you. 30 seconds.
I'm going to have to say my mom and a tie with my wife. Which I know is a good answer, but
that's a very good answer.
Yeah, they're both amazing. They're both about as close to sainthood as you can get. My mom had 9 children. She, had me. 8 others. I'm the oldest. Was a school teacher. Had me. Went back to raised 8 children. One passed away young, and then went and taught school for 20 years. Absolutely amazing woman. The same thing with my wife and our 4 children, 24 to 15. I'm blessed to have some unbelievable women in my life.
Thank you. Senator Sanders, same question for you. Who do you look up to the most? 30 seconds.
Well, that's a great answer. I applaud you for that answer. I love my wife. We're proud of the 4 kids we have and our 7 grandchildren. And my mother died young, and I'm very proud of everything that she gave to me. But in a political sense, I would say that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is a political role model for me. He was a man of enormous courage, who helped break down racism in America and helped open up opportunities for millions and millions of people. Dr. King is one of my role models.
Senator Sanders, thank you. Coming up, here where our candidates stand on issues like immigration and public safety.
You're watching the Channel 3 Senate debate. We're back in a moment.
As governor, I've worked to grow the economy and make Vermont more affordable. But the supermajority in the legislature had other ideas, passing historic property tax hikes, a new payroll tax, 20% more in DMV fees, plans for higher heating costs, and more. I know we can make progress, but I can't do it alone, so I need your help. I'm asking you to elect more common sense legislators who will actually work with me to make Vermont more affordable.
Paid for by Phil Scott for Vermont.
The weather, it's something that affects us all every day, from sunny to severe and anything in between. The Channel 3 Max Advantage weather team has your back.
Soggier start to our day before we slowly begin to dry things out.
Taking the maximum advantage of the good days and preparing you for whatever Mother Nature has in store.
Strong line of storms moving through the region.
We want you to take advantage of the good days and have the advantage over the bad ones. Channel 3's Max Advantage weather team has you covered.
When it comes to your vote, trust is everything. An update now on that tight race out of Windham County.
And you deserve full transparency.
Turn to WCAX with team coverage on local races and every single angle.
The ballot question that will affect everyone's wallet. Getting answers on air, online, anywhere you need us.
Checking the facts on all sides.
So you can make the best decisions for your family.
WCAX, your choice for election 2024.
Mornings can get a little hectic.
But at WCAX, we're up to get you going.
Let's get right to the big stories you need to know before you go.
Up with your Max Advantage forecast. So it's a soggier start to our day before we slowly start to clear out for any evening plans to get you up and prepared for the day ahead. We're up for what's now.
And what's next? If it's happening now, it's happening here. Watch Vermont's own Channel 3 this morning.
We're up to get you going.
And welcome back to the WCAX Senate debate. Senator Sanders, we talked about the southern flow of migrants at the border there, but there's also concern about the northern border for many Vermonters. Are there any concessions on border security and immigration limitations you'd be willing to make to reach a compromise with Republicans on long-term immigration?
Yeah, absolutely.
reform?
Look, I mean,
90 seconds.
the problem is we've been talking about comprehensive immigration reform for a very, very long time, and sometimes actually we came fairly close to it, and then it got torpedoed for one reason or another. The bottom line is that we need strong borders. We need strong borders in the northern part of our country, in Vermont, in the northern sector. We need strong borders, protected borders in the southern part of this country. We also need comprehensive immigration reform. I get very upset when I hear former President Trump and others demonize immigrants in this country. And I said earlier, you have folks who came here at the age of 1 who are productive, tax-paying citizens who, in my view, deserve a path towards citizenship. So, Darren, I see it as a twofold issue. Number one, strengthen the borders with increased manpower, with increased technology, doing everything that we can. Again, my dad came to this country at the age of 17 from Poland. He came legally. And that's what we have to support, is legal immigration, not illegal immigration. On the other hand, we need comprehensive immigration reform.
Senator, thank you. Mr. Malloy, Donald Trump has long called for building a wall and conducting mass deportations. In 90 seconds, what would you call for? And do those options actually address the mass migration from South and Central America?
So I am in favor of I am going to secure both our northern and southern border. It's time. We've got a fentanyl fentanyl pouring into the country. I've seen it across Vermont. I talked just last night, if folks kind of doubt that, go to Jenna's Primus up in Johnson, walk in there, take a look on the right, and you'll see the whole wall of Vermonters that have overdosed. It is literally destroying Vermont, cities in Vermont, Burlington, Rutland. So I want to secure the borders, and I would ask Vermonters to take a look at the recent Swanton sector report from the Customs and Border Patrol. I've talked to a border agent very recently that works on our northern border. He told me flat out, I'm not being allowed to enforce immigration laws. That's a leadership problem right now in our government. So start enforcing laws. I am 100% amenable to, of course, to immigration reform, but that takes work, and that's what Congress is supposed to do. It's not happening. That's part of the fun. Now, President Trump, I do not agree with trying to forget every 10 or 20, whatever the number is, illegal immigrants in this country and trying to deport. I do not agree with that. Criminals, yes. Every 1 to 10 to 20 million, no.
Mr. Malloy, you list crime and drug problems, as you just mentioned, among your top priorities. Vermonters have witnessed an increase in homicides in recent years, many of them drug-related, and the opioid crisis is a large contributor to property crimes and homelessness. What do you think needs to be done to address those issues specifically? You have 90 seconds.
So securing the border. And I actually did some research. You look at the Inflation Reduction Act. I don't like giving taxpayers money to $7,500 for somebody to buy an EV. I don't think we need to control drug prices by the government. But anyways, it takes some of that funding, and we can secure the border with that almost alone. So start with securing the border. Start by supporting our law enforcement community. We're still recovering from the George Floyd Defund the Police Act. Every Democrat voted for that. We're still recovering for that. Get rid of the progressive prosecutor movement, catch and release. I think my opponent and Kamala Harris are looking to get rid of bail to let criminals back out on the street. So that's one thing. I will tell you, it is very real here. I just saw a Vermont EMS just a few days ago, just got off shift, talked to him, how was your shift? 19 calls. 11 of them were overdoses. So we are in crisis here in Vermont, and it's time for some action to actually secure our borders, not kick that can down the road more.
Senator Sanders, do you agree that we have serious problems with drugs and drug-related crime? And what's your response to Mr. Malloy's proposals there? 90 seconds.
Well, anybody who doesn't understand the crisis that exists in Vermont and around this country with opioid addiction and overdose doesn't know what's going on. My memory is correct. I think we suffered well over 100,000 deaths in this country and several hundred right here in the state of Vermont. So, of course, it's a crisis. We've got to do several things. I mean, clearly, we need a coordinated effort to control the borders and stop the flow of these horrific drugs from coming in. The other thing that we are not doing as good enough job on, in my view, is prevention. It's making it clear to people, young people especially, that, you know, you start playing around with these drugs for fun and you get a high, well, you know what, you can get hooked on this thing and the end result is you're in jail or you die. And the last thing, you mentioned Jenner's Place, and I've been there. It's a very effective treatment facility. And we need more of that. What we need in this country to be putting a lot more resources into mental health in general. We have a mental health crisis, but also to help people get off of these terrible drugs. Addiction is a very difficult illness to get off of. And we need a lot more treatment capabilities than we have right now. Jenner's Place is one good place. We have some other good places, but we need a lot more of that.
And we're going to move to our next issue now. Social Security payments, they've gone up in recent years to help combat inflation. Many seniors, though, on fixed incomes say it's still not enough to make their ends meet. On the other hand, many younger workers worry that they're paying into a system that won't be there for them as promised when they retire. Senator Sanders, how would you address both of those concerns? You have 60 seconds.
Take a look at the legislation that I've offered. Here is the story. You got a lot of Republicans out there demonizing but telling story, oh, Social Security is going to go broke tomorrow and so forth and so on. No, what we have to do are a couple of things. First of all, we have to recognize that 25% of seniors in America, in the richest country in the history of the world, are trying to survive on $15,000 a year or more. They need increased benefits. How do you do that? How do you increase the solvency of Social Security? It ain't hard. That's what my legislation does. What it does is right now, if you make $16 million a year, somebody makes $168,000, they pay the same amount into Social Security. If you lift that cap, you can start wherever you want. Biden would start at $400,000. What you could do is increase benefits for seniors. My bill does it $2,400 a year and extend the solvency of Social Security by 75 years. So it will be there for our kids and grandchildren. Bottom line is we have an absurd funding mechanism for Social Security, incredibly regressive, got to change.
Mr. Malloy, the latest report from Social Security trustees show it can pay full benefits for the next 11 years. Then, if lawmakers on Capitol Hill don't act, it would only be able to pay out partial benefits. You mentioned earlier you don't want to cut Social Security. So what measures would you support to the system to ensure that it remains viable? You have 60 seconds as well.
Sure. So I did want to talk the last issue. Another part to the fentanyl problem is China. We have to impose very serious sanctions on China. They're pumping the precursors for fentanyl into Mexico, and it's working its way into the United States. Enough to kill, enough is confiscated every year to kill every American many times over. So it's crisis level. Social Security, you're right. No cuts to Social Security. There are many, I think, very reliable sources that say it is going to start to decline in terms of payments. That's what I talked about earlier. Older folks looking at could very well possibly get a letter in the mail. Sorry, you're only getting 75% or 77%. That's out there. It gets back to the economy, and frankly, I've met about 75,000 Vermonters in the last 2.5 years. It pains me to meet older Vermonters that were retirees, are now working at Walmart to take a job because they can't pay their heat bill or their food bill. I actually do agree that to take a look at the cap, increase it, double it, maybe even triple it. Who knows, with a sliding scale on the other side. But I also look at Congress. Congress has kicked this. They've not solved this problem.
We are going to need you to wrap up your answer here.
Response?
Yep, go ahead, Senator.
I'm glad I'm hearing that you may agree with me. And that's right. Look, nobody, and the vast majority of the American people agree with me. What sense is it that somebody who makes, $50 million contributes the same amount into Social Security as somebody who makes $168,000? Makes no sense at all. So this is a problem that can be easily solved. But in order to do that, we're going to have to take on the political pressure of the big money interests who want to keep it as it is.
And Mr. Malloy, you said you had a little more to say on that since we gave Mr. Sanders more time.
Well, I think, maybe even before we do that, I think there might be some creative ways for Congress to make Social Security solvent. It's not right now.
Senator Sanders, in the debate over abortion rights and the overturning of Roe v. Wade, also came calls to reform the U.S. Supreme Court. Do you think that needs to happen? And if so, what changes would you support? 1 minute.
I do. The Constitution provides lifetime tenure for people in the federal courts, and I support that. But it doesn't say that the 9 members of the Supreme Court will have to be there for their whole lives. So I think, given the fact that the Supreme Court in recent years, so not only Roe v. Wade, it is this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision which allows billionaires to buy elections. It is all kinds of special interests, currying favors, to say the least, putting money into Supreme Court justices. Yeah, we need real reform. We need an ethics reform. They've got to abide by the same rules that Congress and the other people in the federal judiciary do. But in addition to that, I think we might want to be thinking about rotating federal judges in and out of the Supreme Court, a way to get new blood in there.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Malloy, same question to you. Do you believe we need Supreme Court reforms? 60 seconds.
I do not. The Supreme Court, per the Constitution, I don't see changes needed for that. The changes, I think, in terms of packing the court would be dangerous, so I do not support them. I will say, as a U.S. Senator, I'd be deeply involved in the nomination process, and I would look to approve nomination of Supreme Court justices that are qualified and based on their character.
A growing number of researchers agree that social media has contributed to the unprecedented surge in teen mental health issues. Should the federal government step in to address the effects of new technologies on the mental health of young Americans? And if so, how? Gerald Malloy, this is a quick one. You have 30 seconds.
I'm not into censorship. I think that's what you're talking about. So, no, I'm leaning against that.
Okay, Senator Sanders, same question to you. Do you think the federal government needs to take action to address social media's mental health impacts on kids? You have 30 seconds.
I do. The Surgeon General, who I like very much, Dr. Murthy, talked about the isolation that a lot of the young people, and the pandemic exacerbated that, the kind of isolation that they feel in their own communications are not with human beings in community, but via the internet and social media. And I think that has, I've been to schools where teachers now tell me the kids have almost no ability to concentrate. They're always on their phones. Kids stay up 2 o'clock in the morning working on their phones. This is an issue that, it's a profound issue, no easy answers, but it does have to be looked at.
In a similar vein, Senator Sanders, artificial intelligence has improved the lives of Americans in many ways. It is a growing concern, though, as the technology rapidly evolves. So do lawmakers have a responsibility to regulate it? And so it sounds like you say yes. So if so, to what extent? You have 30 seconds on this one as well.
This is an enormously complicated issue. It's not going to be answered in 30 seconds, but this is what I would say. There's a revolution taking place in the economy in terms of artificial intelligence and robotics. If the Congress and the President do not act decisively, the benefits of that increased productivity is going to go to the large corporations who develop that technology and the corporations who benefit from that, and workers may be thrown out on the street. And I think what we are saying is that if humanity is developing technologies which improve worker productivity, workers should benefit from that, and not just the large corporations.
And Mr. Malloy, what do you think on this? Should lawmakers on Capitol Hill bear a responsibility to regulate artificial intelligence? 30 seconds.
Developing. It's developing as AI developer. I actually worked in business development for a company that did AI services. I'm actually very familiar with it. Machines mimicking humans. I support contracts where it's being developed in conjunction with robotics. Absolutely amazing. But to be determined, I think at some point we probably will need government to look at some sort of regulation.
Now you'll each have the opportunity to ask your opponent another question. Gerald Malloy, you're up first on this one. Your question for Senator Sanders, and Senator, you'll have 1 minute to respond.
Sure. Senator Sanders, you're 83 and seeking another 6-year term. You've been in office 34 years and have delivered one bill of significance other than post offices. That was 10 years ago when a bill you co-sponsored with Senator McCain. You have talked for 40 years about health care, housing, education, and have not delivered legislation into law to improve these areas. Their costs have all skyrocketed. Would you please discuss how now, at age 83, as an independent socialist, you're all of a sudden going to start delivering legislative results, not just talk, to lower health care, housing, and education costs?
Well, Mr. Malloy, you're not a spring chicken yourself.
62. We talked about this last night.
I think if you look at my record, what I have done is work hard to greatly expand community health centers throughout the state of Vermont, so that we now have a higher level of per capita participation than any other country, 188,000 Vermonters. I passed a veterans bill and expanded community-based outreach clinic for veterans here in the state of Vermont, in Brattleboro and in Newport. Put a lot of money into White River Junction so that we now have one of the best VA hospitals in the entire country. I passed a bill called Solar for All. $7 billion nationally, $62 million coming right into the state of Vermont. What that means is that working class Vermonters will be able to get help in installing solar panels on their rooftops, cut their electricity bill by over 80%, and help protect us against climate change. I've worked hard, as I mentioned earlier, with success to lower the cost of prescription drugs. In my health committee, we increased funding for primary care. It's a strong record of achievement.
Senator, thank you. And now your question for Gerald Malloy. Mr. Malloy, you've got 1 minute to respond to.
Mr. Malloy, the federal minimum wage is a disgraceful $7.25 an hour. There are millions and millions of workers throughout this country who are trying to make it on horrific wages, starvation wages of $8, $9, $12 an hour. They can't. Minimum wage has not been raised since 2009. And last night, you told Vermonters that you were opposed to raising the minimum wage. Why do you think it's okay that at a time when the richest people in this country are doing phenomenally well, that it's okay for, 20 million American workers to be working for less than $15 an hour? Why aren't you in support of raising the minimum wage to a living wage?
Thank you, Senator. Again, I'm not in favor of a cookie-cutter approach from the federal government. This is, again, I consider this a state issue. Let the states decide. The states have different requirements, to include farming in southern states and in California. I mentioned last night when we had talked about this exactly, go outside, drive down any main street except Montpelier, and you'll see a McDonald's hiring now $15 to $20. So I don't see the need for that. I will say I do want to develop independence in critical technology and energy and food. I'll go off on a tangent here. I think we need to take a look at the FDA about the toxic parts that are coming into our food. But what I don't want to do is needlessly raise the minimum wage, and that'll just get passed on to consumers. Inflation is high enough right now.
Thank you both. We now have one more lighter question for you before we head to the break here. Senator Sanders, in 30 seconds, what do you admire most about your opponent?
Well, he just told me. I strongly believe in family. He just told me that you're a family of 9 kids.
I'm the oldest of 9.
And your mom was a school teacher?
Yes.
Okay. That's pretty impressive.
And Gerald Malloy, what do you admire most about Senator Sanders?
I respect very much that Senator Sanders has served in a member of Congress for 34 years. That is quite an accomplishment.
Thank you both. The debate between Bernie Sanders and Gerald Malloy continues right after the break.
Hear their closing statements when we come back.
Coming up tonight on the Channel 3 News at 11, the WCAX United States Senate debate. Independent Senator Bernie Sanders takes on his Republican challenger Gerald Malloy right here in the Channel 3 studio. We have the recap. Plus, where's the governor?
It's not as though I'm adverse to Burlington.
Vermont's governor tours Chittenden County, hearing the state's most pressing issues, but he leaves out the state's largest city. We'll ask him why tonight at 11.
From touchdown to touchdown.
Off the left side, there it goes.
It's the biggest event of the year. And HBCU Go is your homecoming home.
Make sure to keep watching HBCU Go.
Witness the tradition, culture, performances, and the greatest rivalries of the season. Jackson State University visits Bethune-Cookman University homecoming Saturday, October 26, 3/2 Central.
Watch the game only on WYCI. The weather, it's something that affects us all every day, from sunny to severe and anything in between. The Channel 3 Max Advantage weather team has your back.
Soggier start to our day before we slowly begin to dry things out.
Taking the maximum advantage of the good days and preparing you for whatever Mother Nature has in store.
Strong line of storms moving through the region.
We want you to take advantage of the good days and have the advantage over the bad ones. Channel 3's Max Advantage weather team has you covered.
The weather, it's something that affects us all every day, from sunny to severe and anything in between. The Channel 3 Max Advantage weather team has your back.
Channel 3's Max Advantage weather team has you covered.
Waking up every morning is easy with the Channel 3 morning team.
Thanks for choosing Channel 3 this morning. I'm John McMahon.
And I'm Melissa Borden.
Make us part of your day and know you're up to speed and ready to head out the door.
We bring you news stories every day so you can stay ahead.
I've got the most in-depth forecast so you can have the maximum advantage for your morning commute and for the rest of the day.
Count on Channel 3 to get you the answers.
Because getting answers is what we do best.
We're Vermont's own WCAX.
The weather, it's something that affects us all every day. From sunny to severe and anything in between. The Channel 3 Max Advantage Weather Team has your back.
Channel 3's Max Advantage Weather Team has you covered.
When it comes to your vote, trust is everything. An update now on that tight race out of Windham County.
And you deserve full transparency.
Turn to WCAX with team coverage on local races and every single angle.
The ballot question that will affect everyone's wallet. Getting answers on air, online, anywhere you need us.
Checking the facts on all sides.
So you can make the best decisions for your family.
WCAX, your choice for election.
Welcome back. You are watching the U.S. Senate debate on Channel 3.
Now the candidates will make their final pitch to you. Gerald Malloy, you're up for 60 seconds.
Thank you. Vermont's become unaffordable, unsafe, and a place to leave. This election is about change and delivering results. For no change, re-elect a progressive left career politician to another 6-year term. 34 years in Congress, he's delivered false promises, rising health care, 40-year high inflation, 2 new wars, a fentanyl and crime crisis because of open borders, and $36 trillion in debt. For change, and we need change, elect a West Point graduate, veteran, businessman with an MBA that has 40 years of very relative work and leadership experience delivering results in business, in government, in the military and foreign policy, service in Europe, Asia, Persian Gulf, and the Middle East. My name is Gerald Malloy. I will deliver results for your safety, our economy, and peace on earth. I respectfully ask for your vote. I love our brave little state. It is time for change. May the 14 stars shine bright. May God bless America. Thank you.
Mr. Malloy, thank you. Senator Sanders, your closing statement, also 60 seconds.
Let me take this opportunity to thank the people of Vermont for doing something very unusual and very brave. They have allowed me to represent this state for a number of years as the longest serving independent in the history of the United States Congress. And the reason that I'm an independent is I am less than enthusiastic about either major party. I caucus with the Democrats because I think on issue after issue they are much better than the Republicans. But as everybody in Vermont has heard me, I am very critical of many of the policies being brought forth by the Democrats and by their failure to be as aggressive as they should be in standing up for the needs of working families. This country today faces enormous crises. We're trying to survive attacks against our democracy. Climate change is an existential threat to the planet. We're trying to protect a woman's right to control her own body. We're trying to deal with more income and wealth inequality in a corrupt political system right now. These are enormous issues. They are not going to be solved simply. They're not going to be solved in 5 minutes. I am proud of the record I've established representing Vermont. Very much look forward to your support for another term. Thank you.
And gentlemen, thank you both for joining us tonight.
Our debates continue next week. On Tuesday, the candidates for governor face off, followed by the candidates for lieutenant governor on Wednesday.
And we will have a full recap of tonight's debate on the Channel 3 News at 11. We'll see you then.
Take care. Good night, everybody.